Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of our podcast. Tonight we are going to be talking about episode 7, season ender of the book of Boba Fett. I want to say hi to Justin and Tris.
What is up, everybody?
Hey, what's up?
Kamusta kayo?
Good.
Doing really great.
Tris, I'll give you the honors of introducing our guest for tonight.
We have our very good friend, Miguel Yulo. So welcome to the show, Miguel.
Sir Miguel of House Yulo.
Welcome to the show.
It's a Qui-Gar or Omitopi.
Ulo.
See, I don't even know what that means.
The Qui-Gar is in Mando. Omitopi, I think, is in Rodian.
And so we have begun.
You're off to a good
We are
start.
off to a good start.
Can you please,
Very good start.
To give everybody an idea of Miguel, the Star Wars fan, can you talk to us about your origin story and where you are now in your fandom life?
I started watching Star Wars when I was about 4 because I shared a room with my older sister and she had a huge crush on Hayden Christensen. So she watched Attack of the Clones every single day.
I think we all did.
Every single day. So I ended up becoming a fan because of that. But then as a kid, you go through many phases. So that for me is just a phase. But 2013, I first played Knights of the Old Republic. And that's what I really got into because the lore was so deep and I could be a big nerd about Star Wars. So since then,
Really good game.
I've read probably 70 of the novels or 50 plus of the novels at least. I've played multiple games.
Legends and
Canon. Lots of the graphic novels. I even considered becoming a Wikipedia moderator.
50 lang? Sorry, sabi mo 50 lang?
50 plus.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know plus count. I have about 100 of the novels, but I've only read 70-ish of them. So yeah, that's my background.
Do you also buy the physical books or just
yeah.
the...
He does.
I can't
He
show
has-
it now,
he
but
has a
above me I
collection.
have shelves of everything arranged in chronological.
Wow.
If there's anything that you need to know or ask about Legends, Miguel is your guy. Every time there's a Star Wars quiz competition, if you have Miguel on your team, that's 100% win because Miguel and I did win the
Actually,
Star Wars quiz bee competition a
Tris,
few years
actually,
back.
while you were away, Miguel was actually sharing something about a contestant actually correcting the judge. Ano ba yun? Or
That was him.
that was you.
Who's the judge?
Ikaw daw
Was it
yung
me?
kinorek eh.
Wait, a judge corrected me or Miguel corrected me?
You were the judge and you got
you were the
corrected.
judge.
I was the judge.
You got lawyered.
Oh, right. I was the quiz master for a Make-A-Wish event, and I got the facts wrong.
May prepare akong short contest for you three. I'll play a sound clip and then you tell me which episode it appeared in.
As in the movies, the whole saga, or
I think
just
this
from
is
the
all
book of Boba
episodic,
Fett?
so parang I think this is
Alright.
all episode.
Which episode of
Wait,
The Mandalorian?
including Rogue One or everything?
Yes, all
Okay.
that's all films na lang release na lang para to keep it simple.
Including the holiday specials or no?
Okay, sample
I don't
lang,
know, sige,
sample.
sige,
So for example, this sound.
Episode 3.
Yun yun.
It's from Revenge of the Sith.
I'm sending my hand all the way from down under.
I think it was Mick. No, sorry, it was Miguel.
You were
Miguel. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. Keep track na lang sa record. So 1.
Yeah.
Rogue One.
Yep.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
Episode 6. When they were in Endor. Oh my God.
Okay, Tris.
It's Empire.
I got my...
It's
I got
the
my
Cloud
things mixed
City. The Cloud City duel between Luke.
Because I own that Darth Vader voice changer and it keeps on cycling all those codes, so I got mixed up.
Okay. That's the contest
From Empire.
actually. So thank you for joining. So let's talk about what's new sa Star Wars. They recently released yung Kenobi poster.
I am
Yeah.
super excited. Obi-Wan is my favorite character of all time in Star Wars. They keep telling us they have a lot of new things to give the fans. We've got Hayden Christensen back as Vader. I think Tem is also in the cast, in the roster. Rumored, I think.
No.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think it
What? As a what?
yeah, I think
Commander
so.
Cody.
As the clones. And there's also so and there are rumors. I'm not sure if it's true, but some sources say that Hayden Christensen is back not only as Vader but also as Anakin Skywalker.
Oh yeah.
I'll just use this opportunity to flex my
Oh, come on! Now I have to get mine.
I'm gonna flex it again.
Let me get.
I'm
Are we getting lightsabers? I'm getting
next
mine.
to Darth Vader. I'm really
Now I know bakit
I'm really a
nasingit to
big
sa
fan of-
script. Tay.
for flex purposes. Yeah, obviously, I'm very excited for a Kenobi series. I actually want them to explore more of the Clone Wars flashbacks in live action because that would really be awesome. Instead of just exploring Tatooine again, like in Book of Boba Fett.
This is what I'm excited for. I honestly would be happy with an entire season just talking about how guilty Obi-Wan feels for losing Anakin. Parang Logan style.
Yeah.
Like what Logan did to Wolverine is what I wanted to do to Obi-Wan. Just facing the guilt and feeling like the last of the Jedi, and that's what I want Hayden Christensen's presence to do, is to trigger that emotional
All
upheaval
those,
in Obi-Wan.
And they did say that Hayden Christensen's portrayal of Vader is going to be like a very angry, out for blood Vader compared to like
Have to be.
compared to like the original trilogy. It's more toned down, more respectful, and stuff like that.
Let's talk about episode 7. But before we talk about our reactions to this momentous moment in Star Wars, let's talk about the episode and what actually happened. I'll begin. The first part we see Fett, Fennec, Mando, basically planning and strategizing what their next move is going to be.
We're actually off to a very slow start for this
Ooh,
episode.
we have a hater right here. First scene.
I feel like they wasted the first 10 minutes.
And then I think the exposition moves on to basically showing how Cad Bane was indeed hired by the Pikes.
I actually liked one part on that scene. There was this line from the mayor that he doesn't want any more bombings. It was a clear mirror to like Darth Vader telling Boba Fett, no more disintegration.
Tracking
No more
the
disintegration.
delay between the translation and the sound of, I think, what's his race again?
Ithorian.
The delay between
Ithorian, yeah.
his speech and then the translation. I would assume translation has
Wait,
already
can I-
advanced at that stage, but
Can we
okay,
just
go.
interject? I really like that we have Migs here. Because we finally get the facts straight right on the spot instead of wondering about it for a few seconds.
But you don't know how long Ithorian words are. So maybe like he's still talking, but the word isn't finished. So the translator still doesn't know what he's. We don't know. There's no dictionary yet that we know of.
They're just making random noises.
Mark just got lawyers in Star Wars.
So after that, we finally get to one of the highlights of this episode. We get Grogu back. So we find an X-wing flying into Tatooine. Of course, they didn't make it obvious at first if it's Luke inside or someone else, but yet apparently it's Grogu going to Tatooine
Did you guys
with
think it was Luke?
R2-D2 at the back.
Did you guys think it was Luke?
What do you guys?
I thought it was Luke.
For a few seconds, I was wondering if they'd actually bring Luke
I
back
thought
to
it was Luke,
Tatooine
and I was
at that
pissed.
point.
That it was Luke.
Yeah, I was pissed. I was like, oh my god, they're gonna have another episode about Luke Skywalker and not Boba Fett.
Exactly.
And then it wasn't him. I was so happy.
I was actually quite relieved that they didn't
I was so
bring Luke back
Exactly.
into Tatooine.
I don't think Luke's ever coming back to Tatooine. Like, he did say like, there's nothing for me here. I think that's just like,
We already have Mando hogging the spotlight. We don't need Luke to do the same.
yeah, that's true.
Because you had something to say about about Grogu in general.
Oh, I don't know how I feel about Grogu coming back. Not only in the Book of Boba Fett, but also for the emotional beats of The Mandalorian. Because I feel like the emotional beats of The Mandalorian Season 2 were all about Din making the sacrifice of bringing Grogu and linking him to the Jedi. That's why he took off the helmet to have one last goodbye. That's why in episode 6 of the Book of Boba Fett, he did not go to see Grogu. So I felt that for the audience going through that emotional moment. Yeah. And then now he's just like, oh, he came back. It's all good. It kind of feels like the emotional upheaval.
Like reduces the rewatch value of the season finale or season 2. Yeah. It's like crying for Qui-Gon dying, then he's back.
Yeah.
If they ever
Are you saying you cried?
That's actually
a good point. Qui-Gon?
Qui-Gon?
So you
I was a
didn't cry?
child back then.
I don't know, man. I wasn't born yet.
I was 6 years old back then. It was a big thing for me. we go to this next scene where Team Boba spreads out. So we have the Santo station near the I think it was the district buildings. Then we have the Gamorreans at the spaceport. Then we have the mods at the
they were in
Klatooinian territory,
Aqualish.
or was
Sorry.
it the
They were in Aqualish
yeah, the Aqualish
territory
one.
in the workers' district.
Aqualish one.
Because that was where Boba found
Yeah.
them. So it made sense that they were patrolling their turf.
We had Cad Bane trying to negotiate with Boba Fett.
Right.
So they face off for the first time before before the ambush. Cad Bane tried to convince Boba Fett as if he'll be able to convince Boba Fett to
I mean, for
stand
me at
down
this
and join
point,
them.
I'm so tired of that slow-mo, parang walk-in, na parang brooding look, and then
Yeah, it was kind of overused. Yeah, I agree.
He's 71 years old, Mark.
Like at
Give the
this
guy
point,
a break.
they had that
it's a war.
face-off
Di ba?
scene
It's war.
3 times
So,
already. So you guys think about that Fennec Shand trying to calm down Boba Fett?
I think that was tactical. I think that was strategic on her end. She knew they didn't have the advantage anymore, and that they had to re-strategize.
they were really gonna get defeated by Cad Bane if Boba Fett
I
started
think so.
shooting at Cad
And I
Bane.
think Mando was. Why was he hiding behind that pillar?
Yeah, the
Dude,
pillar.
He just had his
He
gun
was
out.
like,
He was hiding
like,
behind the
all
pillar.
right.
So the one part here I just couldn't, like, my suspension of disbelief didn't work was they were so confident because they in the opening shots they show how big Mos Espa is. It's
Mhm.
huge. And then
Yeah,
they
it's
were
really
like,
huge.
we sent 2 Gamorreans to a quarter of the city and they're gonna watch
Everyone did-
everything.
yeah.
Don't worry.
And you know what sucked?
Yeah,
You
we
know
got it,
what's
boss.
Like, one Gamorrean guard's probably gonna stand out, right? Yeah, 2 side by side,
Too. Gamorrean guards.
I would
Like,
assume they'd at least split up, right?
or
And the
hide,
point
right?
was they got
Because you haven't seen
yeah.
any other Gamorrean
Yeah.
guard, Gamorrean there. So,
Or even Santo, even Krrsantan.
Yeah.
He was just standing in a corner, like,
and then of all places,
yeah, just like looking
the
around.
Trandoshan area pa parang, come on, man.
Like nobody notices the black Wookiee standing
Like,
around,
a few-
looking
like a few
menacingly.
episodes before, he literally ripped an arm off a Trandoshan. And then they just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
let's put him there just to make the Trandoshan stink twice. When they already have a grudge against him for ripping
Yeah,
off
right.
a dude's arm.
Team Boba gets ambushed. So I think the first one was the one with the Gamorreans and the Klatooinian. I actually
Okay.
felt sad that they got killed off.
I felt so emotional when they both died.
And maybe a backstory. I'm sure Pablo Hidalgo's gonna have a write-up in the next
Create a comic.
parang Star Wars Explained book or something.
They're gonna have a comic book for those two Gamorrean
There'll be an
girls.
entire novel series. About the two
Novel dedicated
How
to
he had
those
like 2
two.
kids, and now they're orphans. So they're forced to a life of poverty. And then,
Boba and
Something like
Fennec
that.
have to visit the orphans on Gamor and like thank
Yeah.
them for the service of their father. What did you feel about the kind of fake out that Santo was literally they was dogpiled by the Trandoshans? And then
forget that
That was
part.
funny. I
That
found
was
that
funny
Forget
as
that
hell.
part. Some guy hit him with a blade. Like
oh yeah,
at the start, right?
Oh yeah.
Should have been dead.
Oh.
I'm actually wondering how much armor he has that we just don't see because of the fur.
Oh wait, sorry. He is a cyborg.
Yeah, he has implants, I think.
Yeah. That's why. That explains
Oh,
it.
okay.
That makes sense.
That makes
think,
sense.
Probably he has armor
Ah, he
underneath the fur.
he does. Because the plot of one of the comic books was how he got like the metal frame all over him.
That makes a lot.
Okay, that explains it,
That
yeah.
explains.
That explains
No,
all
I was
the blaster
Taken,
shots.
yeah.
All right, you were
So
saying
the interesting about Krrsantan is they haven't confirmed it in a new canon, but he was an outcast among the Wookiees. And one of the main reasons in Legends for someone to become an outcast among the Wookiees is for them to get the title of Madclaw.
Hmm?
So the title of Madclaw is if a Wookiee uses their claws in battle or to strike another sentient being, that you become an outcast because to them it is sacred that your claws are only used as tools. So if you slash another Wookiee or another sentient using your claws, it's like blasphemy or something, and you then become labeled Madclaw. So the hypothesis is that Krrsantan was labeled Madclaw because at some point he used his claws in
Cage
combat.
fighter, diba? So no
Yeah.
rules.
Which is interesting because
Yeah.
he does have those like gauntlets.
So the mods get ambushed by the Aqualish.
Let's move on. I don't think there's anything here.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Let's not force.
yeah, there's anything.
Yeah,
There's
I
no
think
wait.
I think
She's
the only
cute. I have
important thing
something.
is Fennec
all I
Shand
can say.
saving
I
everyone
do have
else.
something. Okay, But like the whole Fennec Shan saving the Aqualish, that's very
Come on.
no, that's very it's like an Easter egg or like a callback to one of Melinda May. Sorry, one of Ming-Na's famous roles, which is Melinda May in Agents of Shield. And in that show, she's dubbed as the Cavalry because there's like a backstory for her that like she took out like 20 agents, 20 bad guys in one compound or something like that. So it's a really nice callback.
It actually feels like she's playing the same character.
It does.
Would have been nice.
It does. The same like serious killer assassin.
Master
It would have
Assassin.
been nice
Yeah.
if we had like double fandoms to track and to follow, so we could appreciate that small tidbit that you just shared. But since we're Star Wars only,
Oh my
You
god.
have to cover your background.
Marvel hater alert. Yeah, one of my favorite scenes actually for this episode. So we have Boba and Mando making a last stand against
before
the
that
Pikes.
stand,
So they get back.
that short dialogue of like I'm gonna die for you, brother. This is the way.
Then then I will
That's why they
die
dropped the episode name in the name
Yeah.
of honor.
in the name of honor. See, this isn't the book of Boba Fett show, guys. Let's just face it. It's the
I actually like that
Mandalorian
part.
show.
Like I like that part.
I really like
Yeah, I like that part.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I did. I like it. It shows really how Mando is. He's not just a bounty hunter, but he
It
really.
shows character development, yeah.
does,
And it shows you how deep their relationship has become after everything.
What I also particularly like about that is when Boba Fett says, "You really believe that Bantha father about this the way or whatever." In episode 2 of the Book of Boba Fett, you have that whole vision of him back in Camino and him facing his father's death. And his father was a Mandalorian, right?
Mm,
So
Yeah,
to have that interaction,
Mandalore.
that is a Mandalorian founding. Confirmed.
he's an official Mandalorian.
this looks like another
founding.
episode, but okay. See.
To have that interaction, I feel, and like when he's questioning Din about it, it kind of felt to me that he would obviously also think about his father every time he sees the Mandalorian, someone who is more ingrained in Mandalorian. And to have that conversation, I felt, was also kind of part of Boba Fett's journey of dealing with his daddy issues, essentially.
The only
Bosh,
funny thing here that I can draw from is like I'm ready to die for you, bro. Let's kill the Vijaya Jara. A few frames back, he was hiding behind that pillar.
Yeah.
So
Just macho
Yeah.
talk.
Do you think he was half hoping that Boba Fett would just surrender?
if you look at armor to armor, he has more armor than Boba Fett. So he's gonna survive. He's gonna survive. Chance for survival is higher than Boba Fett.
Boba Fett in the Clone Wars grew up amongst Cad Bane, Aurra Sing, and all that stuff. And those were regular bounty hunters. Which is why when he asks, like, "Oh, aren't you gonna leave now?" Because the whole plot of the Book of Boba
Was
Fett
so used.
was that he's so used to his crowd just
Double-crossing,
leaving him.
yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
you were talking
Yeah.
about more of the bounty hunters.
Mhm.
They're just double crossing everyone.
like self-serving people.
Krrsantan used to be his partner. In the first few episodes, Krrsantan was trying to kill him. But he was kind of expecting, oh, Din's another bounty hunter. He's probably just gonna bounce as soon as it's no
Bounce.
longer profitable. But for him to have that Mandalorian aspect in the name of honor, I think is also part of Boba Fett's journey.
There's actually one more interesting bit. So I always hated the Major Domo
He's so funny.
in this series, but for some reason I quite somewhat sympathized with him when he was sent out to communicate the terms of the negotiation.
He was bait.
Yeah, I found it quite funny when he was used as bait. And that tablet that he was holding, it was actually an 80s game.
Yeah.
Some sort of a bowling
Yeah.
Game Boy
Game Boy.
type of device. Yeah, it was quite kind of cool that they used a vintage item. Yep. So for the fight scene, that's one of the biggest fight scenes in this series. What do you guys think about that?
Ballet Boba Fett.
Pointing the gun and raising the
I
knee,
love how he's just like,
doing all the poses. That
And
he
you
can do.
always high ground, diba? So parang anytime you could use a jetpack, obviously you're at an advantage. Your view's better. You're harder to hit because you're moving left and right.
That's actually the most ideal way to play Boba Fett in the Battlefront 2 game. Just to keep on flying
Wait,
around,
Eva,
shooting
you
stuff.
right click and he just flies around. I love that that Mando spin though, where there's like a guy behind and he just spins around.
It was
and
like
does
it
the
was like
cowboy.
I don't know if you guys played Army of Two. I think it was a PS4 game or
I've heard
PS3
about
game.
it. Really
I
love
actually
that
thought
scene.
of this scene as the merch moment, where they're
There's a
trying to
statue
sell
right there.
the
Yeah,
Hot
there's a
Toys figures.
statue opportunity right there.
Yeah.
There's going to be a Kotobukiya like
A back-to-back
Kotobukiya
statue.
yeah.
They're
You-
gonna
you're
force
gonna
you to
have
buy
to-
two statues
Damn.
instead of just one.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a battle pack with the different pikes. So what bugged me about the scene actually is when they're sort of losing the battle, and instead of missing every shot, the pikes hit every shot, but every single shot hits a different plate of Beskar.
instead
Like
of the
literal flat armor.
They don't have a
Literal
Legolas in
flat
the team.
armor.
It's like literal plot armor. Like, I think an interesting question actually about the use of Beskar is, if you set your blaster to stun, it's not a single point anymore. It's like a larger thing. So wouldn't it get
Yeah.
past the Beskar?
I'm actually thinking it's still gonna get absorbed because I think that's how
Like it would
Beskar
slide
works.
off the
Absorbs
Beskar.
Absorbs the energy.
Oh.
Yeah, thank
It probably works like
Beskar-
vibranium.
Yes, thank you. I was just about to say it.
Again.
I was
Sorry,
just
Mark.
about to say it. Beskar kind of works like Captain America's shield. It absorbs
Who?
kinetic energy.
Because in Rebels, the Empire developed a weapon that could dissolve Beskar.
The skull.
Oh,
Beskar.
ginawa ni
Oh, yeah,
yeah, that's
Sabine.
right.
Sabine's machine.
Sabine's machine.
Yeah.
Well, I think the story is that they've destroyed the last one, so the Empire no longer has tech. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the pikes don't necessarily have that technology.
And then we finally see like the Freetown backup arriving.
Did you really think it was Freetown coming, or
With
did
the
you think
weak
it
waves.
was Fennec? Because it was like one sniper shot after the other. So I really thought it was Fennec who was gonna be there, but
But-
Actually, at this point, I forgot about the Freetown people already.
And then we finally get the weak way.
Yeah, who has a name now? He has a name now.
he does.
Yeah.
He's a
Really?
name now. It's Tanti.
He does?
You're kidding, right?
Ah.
Oh,
You're kidding. Tanti? Parang
Thank God
Panty?
it's
Tanti. Taanti.
Okay. Which planet are they from?
Rebels.
alternate skin.
The weak ways, I'm not sure, but I know that they were in Hutt space because they were one of usually like the vassal species of the Hutts. I don't remember if there's a particular name for the planet, but they're a vassal species of the Hutts.
Oh yeah, because I remember in Null Hutta, like majority of the not majority, but like some of the bodyguards or security guards were like weak ways.
Do we have a
Yeah, but
Jedi
this-
weak way? Meron, diba?
Yeah, there
We did.
is.
I think in episode 2, they showed a weak
Yeah.
way Jedi in the arena.
The main vassal species on Nalhata, the Hutts weren't the native species of Nalhata. It's actually the Evokai.
Who now?
So the Evokai are one of those vassal species of the Hutts. Because that's how the Hutts got strong. They kind of just
How do you spell that?
they were really smart. Evocii. So they're one of the vassal
How
species
do
of the
they
Hutts.
look like though?
Because the main vassal species of the Hutts are the Weakways, the Evokai, the Klatooinians, and Niktos.
Oh,
I think it's
okay.
I think it's pronounced Evo Sai.
No, because I played SWTOR. Cool trivia fact
Yeah.
about some of the Hutt vassal species is in Return of the Jedi, I'm not sure if it came out in the source material, but like 3 of Jabba's henchmen are just referred to as Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. As if those were the names.
Replaceable,
of the-
Ooh, next Nikto here. Come here.
At first, people weren't, if I'm not mistaken, people weren't sure if those were like the names of the particular characters, but they ended up making Klaatu be a Klatooinian, Nikto be a Nikto. But the fun fact about the naming is, it actually came as this phrase from the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, where the aliens would say Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. And it was a fun Easter egg that they put
Oh
it
yeah,
into
I think I
Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And then from that, they came up with the species name.
We have 2 giant droidekas, making it difficult for Boba and Mando.
They're called
They mentioned the name of those. Yeah, what's the name again?
Sorry, what are they called?
Scorpionic droids. They're not droidekas, but they're similar
Droid.
design.
I feel like we've seen a version of that in The Force Unleashed too.
I'm not sure, but if I'm not mistaken, they were from unused concept art of Attack of the Clones. And then they were made in universe in the 2005 New Essential Guide to
Look
Droids.
at you. How did they generate yung shield generator?
They have a shield.
They have a shield generator.
They have a shield generator.
Why
How
is
did
it
they generate the shield? They
so
have
it's
a shield
localized,
generator.
pero to certain distance, because if I was the maker, like I expand it a little bit so that you can include the rest of the squad.
Yeah, because an interesting about it is that they can shoot from inside.
Right.
Yeah,
Can you
Mm.
step inside? Hindi, di ba?
If you look at it in the Phantom Menace, when the Gungans put up their energy shields, the droids could walk through because Mando. I'm not sure it's Mando or Boba who specifically said that
The
our
speed.
energy weapons can't hit it, and our particle or projectile weapons have
Are creating too much.
too high of velocity.
Yeah, it was
I think
Mando.
that was a reference to the Clone Wars movie. I think Anakin was telling Ahsoka about how to pass through the shield generator. They were talking about speed, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think it was a heads up to that.
Yeah,
one.
then also in the Clone Wars, in the Onderon arc, Captain Rex and Ahsoka are teaching Saw Gerrera and the Onderonian rebels
How to
how to
throw
roll
thermal
grenades.
detonators under droidekas.
I actually loved that part when Mando was trying to get through using the dark saber.
Dark saber.
It was just
That's the
hacking
most.
on the shield.
That's like the most cliche thing ever. Is like, all right, I'm gonna try the lightsaber. Nope, it's not working.
The secret there is Mando was supposed to double jump and then he hits it vertically. And you double jump again and you hit it vertically because that's how you pop the
And press
droideka
up,
shield
up, down,
in Lego
down,
Star
left,
Wars.
right.
Yeah. You have to you have to double
and you
jump,
come down vertically
and then you have
twice,
to.
and it breaks the droideka shield.
I can't relate.
Mark is just like, oh my god, I'm surrounded by nerds.
Next.
Kalimoto and Grogu enter the battlefield, and they were not aware of what's happening. Yeah, it was a surprise for them that they were facing the droidekas.
Yeah, I got a surprise for you, man. I love how Mando just
Yeah,
jumps
I
off
think,
the back.
Yeah, I just realized. Yeah, you're right. They're like the comic relief for the battle scene.
Yeah. So the fun fact there is that what she's riding the rickshaw is actually similar to what
Anakin,
and Padme rode in Episode 2. And if you notice, actually, Grogu jumps pretty high when he jumps into Mando's arm. So he probably used what Luke taught him.
I actually found it quite cliche that they had Grogu hidden underneath all those blankets in the rickshaw. It's as if we don't expect him to show up in that scene.
Yeah, I was half expecting that chick. Oh, I actually left him in Mos Eisley. You can visit him after this battle.
Yeah.
After that, we finally have the big reveal because earlier in the battle, Boba Fett left and said he was going to get help essentially or find something to come into the battle. And Mando says, well, you have no friends. So my question is, well, it's revealed that he comes in riding a Rancor. But did all of you expect it to be the Rancor, or did you think he had some other trick up his sleeve?
People were
I expected
thinking,
the Rancor.
just get the fucking slave one, man. Rain fire from above.
Oh, yeah, get the gunship.
That's actually a big plot hole. He could have used the slave one actually.
Yeah.
It's gonna be more efficient.
So my actual prediction when I was watching the episode was Boba is going to fly on his jetpack into the middle of the Dune Sea and beg some random Tuskens to like, please help me. I have a gaffy stick. I'm one of you.
He's gonna do the hand sign thing.
Just
Like Mando.
please.
Like a bantha.
Like a bantha.
So I was 100% expecting that. But we had the big reveal and you had like the kaiju vibes of hearing the Rancor and everything.
roar.
And he
I know.
brings it into that.
Roaring in the background, yeah.
Yeah.
It became like a whole kaiju style episode once the Rancor was brought in to turn the tide against the Scorponok droids.
You have so many swings, right? So it starts with them being surrounded, and then they take the initiative. They fly above, and then they take advantage, and then they get turned back. Like, how many times are we going to see that swing happen in this episode? Like, I think after the fourth swing, I was like, okay, now you're just extending it to 1 hour. In a way, it was predictable for me.
Yeah.
I also have a question. Did you
Yeah.
feel Boba coming into the Rancor felt earned? Because when we first got introduced to the Rancor with Danny Trejo, he was just saying training a Rancor is a lot of work. And then we saw none of the training, none of the real connection between Boba and the Rancor. And then he just comes in here having zero problem riding the Rancor into
It's
battle.
basically your somehow Palpatine return moment. So
I did really love seeing someone ride a Rancor because it does call back
Force
the
Unleashed.
Storm
The bad.
no, not even the Force Unleashed. Originally, the first time
Dathomir?
riding Rancors first came out was from the Witches of Dathomir in Dave Wolverton's Courtship of Princess Leia. So
Yeah.
seeing it in live action was still a treat for me, even if we still had the somehow Palpatine returned of. Somehow Boba Fett learned how to ride a Rancor.
did you guys figure out the gender of the Rancor?
It's a guy, right? think Danny Trejo mentioned it.
I think it was a girl.
I'm not sure.
And now
They're
you
like
see,
sister, they
basically,
say.
there's going to be a Grogu moment with the Force, and we get that. What do you guys think about that?
I was screaming at the screen.
I was actually expecting that Grogu would actually lift the entire
Yeah,
robot.
the entire robot.
So wait,
Yeah, the entire
what
droid,
he
yeah.
did was he forced the droid to miss the leg, right? Because it hit the armor and it slid off the armor.
What he did particularly was he pulled off like a particular
A
part
part
of
of
a
it,
the
yeah.
droid,
Yeah.
Like a screw
Yeah,
on the
which actually
pneumatics
connects
on
to
it.
the last episode where he blew up the training remote by pulling off like a part of it. So I
Yeah.
think it's kind of like he remembered that skill
Oh.
from Luke, so now he could apply it in battle.
The Grogu's specialty is gonna be forceful.
I was screaming at the screen because Mando's just like, I'm not gonna roll over. I'm just gonna wait for Grogu to use the Force.
It was actually weird. It was just
Yeah.
covering his face, waiting for the droid to come back at him.
Yeah.
My issue with one of my issues was it felt like they gave Boba, Mando, and Santo. They just took so many hits, and then but at some scenes they seemed that they were not phazed at all by any of
They
the
were
hits.
fine.
They were
Yeah.
full health,
You,
and then at some they just seemed super
you're
hurt.
forgetting this guy basically got bear hugged with vertebrae breaking with a
With a toe
toe curl.
Toe curling. Toe
2
curling.
seconds after, he walks out with a bathrobe.
He
I'm
walks
like,
out
I'm
in the robe.
fine. Where are we going? Baka may back the juice.
Or something like that.
Well,
No, it's a
Well, actually,
it's a toe
in
curl.
the Republic Commando games, they'd have like Bacta shots. They could like, shoot themselves with Bacta.
So parang like
Yeah.
Oh,
impact.
like a stim.
A
Yeah,
stim. Yeah, so who knows? They were just drugging themselves up the whole
Probably.
battle.
How about that face-off moment
Oh,
with
I
the
love
big
that.
baddie?
I really,
yeah, I
yeah.
love it. Yeah,
I like
even though
it.
it's the third or fifth face-off that we had, still,
Yeah.
still good. Yeah.
Who
So-
did you think was gonna draw first or parang win that duel?
Definitely
Cad Bane.
Cad
You
Bane
thought it
because
was
we
Cad.
saw
It was
how
Cad.
fast he
Because-
was. Yeah, for the shoot-off, definitely
in the
Cad Bane.
Clone Wars
Do you think-
real though, if that's I'm not sure the canonicity of the unreleased Clone Wars real. That's how Boba got the dent in his helmet, and why if you notice when Cad Bane fell, he
Why-
has the metal plate. Because in the Clone
Yeah.
Wars scene, they drew at the same time, so it was essentially a draw. Because it hit Boba's helmet and it hit Cad Bane's hat and grazed his head.
Do you think
But-
it was a part of Boba Fett's plan to draw Cad Bane closer to him, like just to get shot first, then try to?
Yeah.
Yeah. You think it was?
I don't
Possibly.
think so.
Because,
But you go on, Krrsantan.
all right.
I want
Okay,
to
you
hear your
go
reasoning
first.
first.
Because throughout the whole fight, you don't see Boba with his gaffer
Gaffy
stick,
stick.
right?
Mm,
Yeah, with the
yeah, that's what
gaffy
I thought too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then he shows up in front of Cad and he has it. So I think he already knows that he's out, and because he also knows that he
He's
was able to kill.
outmatched.
Yeah, he's outmatched.
Cad Bane's pretty old. I can probably still take him. Because think about it, he probably
Yeah.
hadn't seen Cad Bane in years. Right? Cad Bane's 71 at this point.
Mm.
He wasn't there for Cobb Vanth's draw. He didn't know how fast Cad Bane still is. So I think he probably took the risk.
Miscalculated it.
Because
Ah.
yeah, I think he took the risk that maybe he could draw faster because Cad Bane's old.
Is Cad Bane like a cyborg? Because the other Duros didn't have those hoses going to their mouths.
I'm not sure if he's a cyborg, but he does definitely have some technological
Like implants.
because he has
Mm.
like those monitors. So that's
Yeah.
another question
Probably a
actually. Do you
mod.
think he's dead? Because I've seen some debates that he's not dead because parang his heart
There was
monitor
that
that was
sound
still
thing, yeah.
It's still
After US
There was a
flashing.
sound
Yeah.
also if
Ah.
you
Yeah.
listen to it closely.
The moment that Cad Bane removed Boba Fett's helmet, I was praying really hard that no one else tries to save Boba Fett because I want Boba Fett to redeem himself and not just get saved
Yeah.
by someone else. Because if someone else saves Boba Fett, then it's gonna be an entire failure for the
For the
series.
show.
It didn't redeem Boba Fett.
Grogu.
I was actually half expecting
No!
Mando to show up and shoot Cad Bane in the back. Everything.
In true kaiju fashion, we have a uncontrolled beast running around Tatooine. Becomes a side quest on its own. Actually, when they pounded the Mando into the dome of the
The wall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Like-
the top of the
and
top of the
then
building.
getting bitten the head and withstanding the pressure. Like I had newfound respect for Beskar at that point.
Because the interesting part is that if you watch Rebels or the Clone Wars, the Mandos are wearing Beskar, but they get hit pretty easily and they take blaster hits really easily. But if you remember in The Mandalorian, he gets like pure Beskar, which is incredibly rare.
Oh, right.
Because they were
right,
saying, wow, he
okay.
got pure Beskar from the Empire because the Empire is the one trashing Mandalore. So many of the other Mandalorians have Beskar, but it's not as pure as Din's. Din's Beskar is especially pure because if in Rebels, if I'm not mistaken, they talked about how much of the more pure Beskar armor is passed down through the generations. So it's very old. Because parang the mining yield on Mandalore at the time wasn't as high as it used to be. And because the Empire was controlling the mines, Beskar in itself became a rarer commodity. So that's why Din's Beskar specifically, because he got it from the Empire, meant that it was incredibly pure because the Empire was the one controlling the mines of Mandalore.
So what can
Makes total sense.
it not withstand? Because at this point, it's like the ultimate plot armor.
Beskar spear.
Oh yeah, they mentioned that. They mentioned the armor
Yeah.
mentioned that
Beskar to Beskar.
Beskar to Beskar can like
So the
enough
whistling birds
with enough
can
force.
pierce Beskar.
If I'm not mistaken, also if you use a lightsaber and you literally just like spend time waiting for it to melt through the Beskar,
It would.
you could potentially, but for glancing blows and stuff, it could still withstand that.
After the whole showdown and Grogu, making the Rancor fall asleep using the Force, we get this really cool mini scene where Fennec Shan, the Master Assassin herself, does what she does best. So
It was actually a good scene, even though it was really short.
it
I think
was
just the right amount of connection.
Do you think that
Less
was
either.
a reshoot? Which,
What do you mean?
because there's rumors that they had reshoots for that episode. Which scenes did you think were added after?
I think Mando Grogu.
No, I think that was their first
Yeah.
start.
I didn't know there were
because-
reshoots. I thought that was just like a rumor or
Because
something.
they probably made an entire series with a little of Mando and Grogu, then they found it quite boring, so they added more Mando there. Probably.
Do we see Grogu interact
I didn't
with
know
Boba?
that.
Not yet.
No, so it
Not
is
yet.
possible that those are reshoots. That the amount of Grogu at least. Can I just say I was actually surprised that in a Disney Plus show, they had the mayor get like hung by a
Hanged.
Oh, yeah.
they got the mayor just like strung from the ceiling.
You think
I
you
find
think
out
that's
you see him
too,
just-
too gory for Disney?
No, but I think it's like pushes the limits.
He was struggling for a bit,
I
yeah.
think it pushes the
Yeah.
limits a bit. Which is why I found
Yeah.
it very, very
But anyway,
nice.
it was still tasteful because you didn't see the actual neck.
didn't see-
You could see
It was
the
a
legs,
Slightly
but
off screen.
I mean, it's definitely better than a toe curl.
It was more brutal than than the mayor getting hanged.
the one thing I also liked there was the speed of her speeder bike when she was going through the.
Oh yeah.
Diba? I think I
It was
I
definitely
really
much
think they
faster than the best
They
one.
listened to the feedback like that's not how you're right.
So that's the edit.
Could be.
They made
Could
it
be.
faster.
In response to the episode 3
Vespa.
the Vespa chase.
Okay, then we get to the conclusion where we have Boba and Fennec Shand walking around Mos Espa, bowing to their constituents and stuff. And we also have Mando and Grogu flying away. What do you
The
guys think of that?
with the epic soundtrack.
With the epic twin sons.
We already knew
Um,
they were gonna use that spaceship and the back seat, right?
There was a
The dome
Yeah.
for Grogu, yeah, definitely. It
that was for Grogu.
obvious the moment
Juice was
they
already
placed
saying
that
it.
in
there.
terms of
There was no way they're not gonna use it for
Fett
Grogu.
and Fennec walking around Tatooine.
It was a lame scene.
Why did it
Actually-
have to be the right arm?
It's like they tried to force a comedy scene in that part, but didn't really work that well. It was kind of awkward.
Yeah, so my issue with that scene isn't necessarily how it played out, but that I never understood the stakes for the people of Mos Espa.
Yeah.
Because they never showed the Pikes being mean to the people of Mos Espa. And the people of Mos Espa had been living under some form of criminal syndicate for decades at this point. So I was never sure how the entrance of the Pikes would directly affect them, that they would suddenly love Boba Fett for saving them from the Pikes. And Boba Fett is literally going around with a Rancor, destroying half the city.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of an undercooked plot point. Why would the Mos Espa people care.
The people of Mos Espa, at least from like the Phantom Menace, they don't have any particular sympathies for the
Yeah,
Tusken
doggy doggy,
Raiders.
right?
like they're
Yeah.
busy surviving, so they have
Yeah.
no time for like high politics and shit. But
Which is why
Yeah.
I don't understand why Boba also suddenly feels some loyalty or willingness to save the
The Mos
people of
Espa.
Mos Espa from the plight of drugs. If Boba never fought the Pikes, the sanctuary would never have been bombed. There would never have
Yeah.
been any damage to the city
Actually,
because the Pikes wouldn't have to shoot anyone.
If he would have just like negotiated in the first place, that is
Or-
that is like an interesting
take the battle
point.
outside of the city center, draw them out, and then engage. I don't know, in the mountainous area where there might be Tuskens.
probably Boba Fett ended up using the people of Mos Espa as human shields.
It's collateral
Yeah,
damage.
because it actually plays into what the mods were saying. We should fight in the city because this is where the people
They're-
are. But the counterpoint to
They're
that
the
is,
spies.
wouldn't it be safer for the people in the city if you fought outside of the city? We never saw something like Jeddah and Rogue One where the stormtroopers are really being like an occupying force, going house to house and
Yeah.
being mean to everyone.
Mm.
We never saw the Pikes do that to anyone in Mos Espa at all.
Mm.
Yeah, they just blew up Garza, but that's because Garza was tied to Boba.
Yeah.
It's all Boba's fault.
Hmm.
Boba is the villain.
That's why it's the book of Boba Fett.
What did I think about the post-credit scene?
Boba made a throwaway line that someone's using the back to tank, and we all thought, of course, it was
Yes.
Santo, but apparently it's not Santo. It was someone else. It's our favorite Boba Fett wannabe. What
You
do
guys think it's
about
Cobb?
that? Yeah, it was.
showed
It
to be
was. Yeah,
Cobb.
they showed Cobb Vanth inside it.
Can't miss the hair, man.
So my question about that though is, if you remember from the last episode, it was like a shoulder shot,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it didn't seem that he lost any like particular
Any
part of his
part.
body. So I'm assuming that the Bacta could cover it. So what is the need for him to be modded?
Be submerged.
No, I like being submerged in
But
Bacta.
to be modded.
Why did the
modded.
mod
modded.
doctor need to be there? Like what
Maybe he
thing
like
could they add?
maybe the shot
Probably he had to be amputated or something.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So how was it?
maybe the shot like needed like took out an artery or
Yeah,
like
maybe.
a joint.
Maybe Anakin Skywalker with a robot arm.
But yeah, I don't think it was very impactful. It essentially just showed us Cobb Vanth alive, and he will be modded.
And he'll be probably
actually-
back for season 3.
That's the only part that made me think there's gonna be a season 2. But
There's an article
Yeah, other
out
than that,
that
no.
basically ties this scene with Vanth showing up in that Rangers series.
Rangers in New Republic.
I thought that was cancelled.
I don't think it's going to confirm to be cancelled, but I think it's rumored to.
so they say.
Rumored to be cancelled. Okay.
Personal highlights for this show.
Uh,
I'll begin. So for In the Name of Honor episode 7, my personal highlight was definitely that sequence where they're having that bro conversation. Mando,
I feel like
Mando and
I feel like this is
Nope.
leading to a joke.
Mando and Boba Fett.
Okay.
Except for the intervention part by the Mayordomo. I thought that conversation plus the initial fight scene, them flying and back to back, army of two vibe. I really like that. I think that's always been the highlight for me. I think that the action part is always going to be something that I will crave for whenever I see Star Wars. Yeah, that's what I liked.
Yeah, for me, the single most memorable scene was the back-to-back scene with Boba and Mando against the Pikes. I love me a great shootout scene, and that they really did that scene really well. And yeah, for me, it redeemed Boba Fett in this series.
Yeah, I would agree. I love the conversation between Boba and Din because, as pointed out by Migs earlier, Boba was surrounded by people who double cross him all the time. So this really shows how Mando is a Mandalorian by heart and everything and stuff like that. And of course the last stand, the back to back shootout, because as much as this is a Book of Boba Fett show, Mando had the better moves. But yeah, I really love that action and final showdown between Boba and Cad, because that really gives us like a number one, it gives us closure on the whole deleted scene in the Clone Wars, showing Boba defeat Cobb Vanth not using a blaster but rather his traditional weapon that shows us
Go
that
ahead. Go, Migs.
Boba's developed.
Do your thing.
I've,
The gaffy stick.
the gaffy stick. Sorry.
Hey, you said you said
I feel like
Cobb, dude. Yes.
I didn't say Cobb,
I didn't notice.
Oh, sorry. I am so sleepy. I'm sorry. I just finished like a 3-hour long math exam before I got into the show. I'm so sorry. So like gaffy stick. All right. So using defeating Cad Bane with a gaffy stick shows how this is a Boba has developed his personality and how
You can handle his own.
yeah, he can finally handle his own, and he
He's
knows
the
who
biggest
he is.
baddie in town.
I would say, like, apart from that conversation between Boba and Mando, I think the final duel with Cad Bane was the closest we got to learning what Boba's motivations were from Boba's perspective. He didn't talk much, but I think the questions thrown by Cad Bane, like, you have your father's blood, you're a killer, right? I mean, he's a clone, and the clones were essentially made out to be mass murderers after Order 66. And he kind of just took upon his father's mantle of just being the baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy. But the book of Boba Fett has been about him kind of reinventing that, right? So I think it's the closest we got to a callback to episode 2, where he is dealing with his birthright of being a killer, of being a bounty hunter, but also trying to crave and find that kind of family that he lost with his father also, right? Which is why I think when he brought out the gaffy stick, it also symbolized that he learned from the Tuscans what it meant to have a family or what it meant to have a tribe of his own. So him becoming the daimyo was kind of a reflection of that, right? So he didn't beat Cad Bane by being a bounty hunter. He beat Cad Bane by like using tricks he learned from the whole tribe experience of trusting other people, which he never had as a bounty hunter. And a cool callback was, so it came to my mind. I don't think it's directly related, but in the Legacy of the Force series, it's not unexpected, right? It's unexpected he used the gaffy stick. In the Legacy of the Force series, Jaina Solo actually goes to Boba Fett to learn how to kill her brother Jason, because she said Boba Fett could teach her something of how to kill a Jedi that a normal Jedi would not know how, because a Mandalorian or a bounty hunter would have different tricks up his sleeve. So now it felt like a different spin on that of the Tuscans and the close quarters combat a gaffy stick would bring would be something Cad Bane would not know how to anticipate, because he's used to bounty hunters just drawing a blaster and being like a cowboy essentially. So I thought that was a really cool scene that he brought out the gaffy stick, and it represented so much more than just outsmarting Cad Bane, but it also represented his time with the Tuscans and his actual motivations in the whole series.
For the personal lowlights, I actually have two. So the first one is obviously I made clear earlier. I really hated the pacing of the opening scene. It was like an in-your-face setting up the playing field. They didn't really talk about much other than recap what happened before. And it was actually quite confusing because remember in the end of season 6, Cobb Vanth didn't actually make a firm answer. Didn't really give a firm answer to Mando if they're gonna help. But when Mando arrived in the sanctuary, he was very assertive that Cobb Vanth will help us and all that. So it was quite confusing for me. The second low light for me was when Cad Bane used his flamethrowers just to ward off the Rancor. That was kind of it was like well, that was easy. It was kind of weird that Rancor just ran away after being flamethrowered in the face. Yeah, that was weird.
Every time the Vesper Rangers were in shot, I kind of feel like that was okay. We don't need more of this. And then the guy, there was that slow-mo scene where the guy just like turns around. That was so unnecessary. And I think some of the action scenes were a bit wonky for me. Like it wasn't choreo. It's weird because Robert Rodriguez directed the Mando episode of Boba appearing for the first time, and then this episode, the action scenes and the choreography feels really off.
Yeah, so for me, I would say that there was one part that I just could not like my suspension of disbelief is completely broken, is Boba Fett and the Mandalorian are supposed to be smart people because they're warriors, right? They're not just brute force, whatever. But in the scene where the Scorpionic droids come in, all the mods, all of the Freetown fighters, just all hide behind one speeder. And I was just like, you have the entire sanctuary. You could have posted snipers, you could have been spreading out, but they're just hoping that one car holds. And I was just like, this seems just blatantly stupid, right? Like, why didn't they go inside the sanctuary? Why are they all just hiding behind this one car? And then when they disperse, you have like minutes where they're literally all just running down the road in a straight line.
In the same
In a
direction.
straight line.
Like no one goes into any side corners or anything. They're all just running in a straight line. And the Scorpionic droid just misses every single shot. And I'm just thinking,
they were like
they're
firing on the
literally
rooftops. and
right in
stuff.
front of you. They're all running in a straight line. And none of you are dying. That to me was a big low light. I think maybe like directorially, it just did not make any
Yeah.
sense to me.
I didn't like the back and forth. You know, like the bring a bigger gun, one upmanship.
Yeah.
You
One-upping each other.
You could see it. Like this was somebody brings a bigger gun, somebody brings a bigger gun, somebody brings a bigger gun. Etc. So if I was hoping that they would break that mold or really raise the stakes, and if they thought bringing a Rancor was raising the stakes, I that wasn't raising the stakes for me. I would have hoped if somebody died, that would have raised the stakes for me because it not necessarily raising like the weaponry aspect of things, but the motivation would be different now because it's gonna be like there's
Mhm.
somebody who died. That's a stickler for me. So I wish they would have improved on that.
So who do you think should have died?
Interesting question.
If anyone should have died.
Fett.
I would have to agree.
I think
Fett should have died there.
I'm actually thinking Fennec or Cobb.
I think
Like it would give Boba the motivation to seek vengeance or something.
I mean, Fett can finish the fight all the way to the end, but dying would have been the ultimate redemption arc for him.
Mm.
to show that like he really cared about the people.
All that. What's your score? What's your final score for this episode?
I'll give it a 7
Out of 20 or sorry, out of 10.
out of
okay.
10. Out of 10.
I'd give it like a 5 or a 6. I think some scenes individually were very fun, but I didn't feel that they were earned throughout the series. Like the Rancor, Boba, we never saw Boba train the Rancor. We never saw why the people cared about Boba and why they hated the Pikes. So to me, I'd give it like a 5 or a 6.
I calibrate my expectations coming in. I knew it was a Robert Rodriguez helmed episode,
Oh.
and seeing the body of work, I already knew. For me, I think of it as a 7 out of 10 because I pretty much lowered my expectations out of this episode.
My score was actually pretty high the first time I watched it, around 8.5 out of 10, probably. But yeah, the second time I watched it, when I was doing it, I was analyzing it scene by scene. I think I'm gonna give it 7.5 out of 10. The spectacle wears off when you rewatch it. So it was good the first time around, but when you rewatch it, you kind of see that it was kind of tired. There was a trope of one-upping each other every now and then. And it just dragged on. So yeah, I'm gonna give it 7.5 out of 10.
Two things that you would have loved to see for this series but didn't.
So I have a really big stickling point for me is episode 2 set up that his connection to Django was a big part of his transformation as a character throughout the series. We saw those flashbacks to Camino, flashbacks to Geonosis. And when we saw the whole Mando episode talking about what it meant to be a Mandalorian, the Mandalorian lore, I thought that introduction would be a means for Boba Fett to rationalize or face his family past, that his dad was a Mandalorian foundling. And what does that then mean for Boba Fett? How does it relate to his need for a tribe or a family?
Flesh that out more,
Will he
basically. Flesh that.
Yeah, I think flesh that out more. Flesh out the daddy issues aspect a lot more. The second thing I'd probably want more of is I felt they dropped the Tuskens too quickly. Like, sure, they died, but I felt that there was still a lot to explore. Like, in The Mandalorian, we saw the Freetown residents working with the Tuskens. I was actually expecting those Tuskens, it was a different tribe from who Boba Fett stayed with, but I would have expected him to also make an appearance in this episode to kind of harken back to he was accepted into Tusken society and he would want to connect to that warrior culture a lot more.
What would I have loved to see?
More of Boba Fett.
Actually, that's a good point. His badassery, and his penchants for violence. Like you get used to Boba Fett in the comics. Toys with people. He brutal, di ba? Brutal signature, etc. And if I saw more of that, I would have enjoyed this series a little more because it's more familiar. For a fan like me, it's more familiar. Other things would be the original trilogy, Bounty Hunters. One or two would have been perfect, I
Yeah.
think. Just for like old timers like me.
Yeah, for me, I would love if they explored that plot with the Pikes and the Mayor more. Because if you remember in the first few episodes, they had that mystery surrounding the Mayor. Then apparently, come the final episode, you just have to take it at face value that the Mayor was in line with the Pikes. That's it. It was a very shallow plot point. So I would have loved if they did something deeper for that one. The other thing I would love to see is, yeah, same as Mark. I would have loved to have seen more of the OG bounty hunters.
I wish they would have fleshed out some of the stories or some of the plots they've introduced. Like you can't just do the whole Tusken Raider warrior culture in 2 episodes, and then you kill them off at I think it was the 3rd or something like that. So I think they should have at least fleshed that out first to give us a more understanding of why Boba was trying to reinvent himself and not be that brutal bounty hunter that we saw. And then another thing that I would have wanted to see, the whole brutal Boba, that when you really piss him off, he just goes and shoots people.
You're actually right, because up until the last episode, you're still not sure what Boba's motivations
But
were.
the motivations were, yeah. So
Like,
I
still a
think
question mark.
Okay, next up, 2 things that you saw but wish you didn't see for this series.
I think you would all agree on one thing.
are we talking about the toe curl? No,
my
okay.
number one would be I wish I didn't see Luke in this series. Prior
Okay.
to the old conversations that we've had, I think Star Wars is using him as a crutch, and I'm super scared that after we get used to seeing Luke, or after we grow tired of seeing Luke, there's really nobody after Luke. That's it. That's gonna be the end of my fandom. I think if I don't get that sense of wonder every time I see Prime Luke. The other thing that I saw that I wish wasn't there, Grogu also.
Joker.
Grogu. He's very Mando specific from a theme perspective. There is really no connection with Boba Fett as far as this little green monster is concerned. Mando I can understand because there's shared experience. They have a somebody owes someone a favor, etc. So there's connection there. But Grogu is basically just Mando's. It's a part of Mando's stories.
I think the one thing that I wish we didn't get that much of was Mando, because Mando just hogged too much of the spotlight that we didn't get a lot of character development for Boba Fett. It was almost zero character development, to be honest, for Boba Fett in this series. Yeah, I didn't really appreciate episode 3. So I wish we never had episode 3. Because I think at the end of episode 3, I had my jaw on the floor. I was like, did they just really come up with this?
Power Rangers.
Wait, what happened in episode
The
3?
mods.
Yeah, the mods,
Alright.
the mods episode. It was just really, I don't know, the production value was really bad for that episode. They didn't really I was just surprised that they came up with that one.
I think for me, I felt that the villains didn't seem particularly interesting. Right? I think when they introduced the Hutt twins, I was actually rather excited for that because the Hutts ruling Tatooine was kind of the status quo that we know from the original trilogy and stuff. So I felt it might have even been more interesting for Fett to be fighting against the Hutts, representing the status quo of Tatooine, rather than bringing in the Pikes, who we don't really know much about in context of Tatooine. We don't really see them as particularly interesting villains. They just want to run spice. But with the Hutts, it has that background of how Jabba ruled, etc. So it kind of felt more concrete that he's fighting against a particular style of ruling on Tatooine, rather than the Pikes who are just somewhat generic gangster villains.
Fish face.
Number 2 for me, well, yeah, I agree with everyone else. I don't think episodes 5 and 6 should have been in the series. I really enjoyed them as a Star Wars fan, but it did nothing for the series.
One thing that the show producers absolutely got right for this series.
Boba Fett's new duds. I really love the
Really?
darker hue of the costume. Yeah.
Yeah, the costumes.
I still love OG because it's OG, but
And you
yeah,
know
I
this
really
part.
love the darker hue this time around.
But
But if I were to make a Boba Fett costume, I'll still make the OT costume.
Yeah, for me, episode 2. I think, minus episode 5 and 6, episode 2 was the best out of all of the episodes because it dealt the most with Boba Fett's past, and also because, as a classic film fan, the Lawrence of Arabia homage was just done extremely well for me.
Mm.
And making the Tuscans like the Bedouin warriors in Lawrence of Arabia, to me, was just really well done. The cinematography was amazing, and that's why I think that is what I will take out of the Book of Boba Fett. Episode 2 was amazing.
I'm just gonna nod and pretend I understood all those.
He's just
references.
referring to the dance, actually, to the campfire dance.
I really love the dance. I actually really love the dance.
So for me, what they absolutely got right.
Yeah, the dun 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 dun, the
Okay.
Jeopardy song as Mark sings.
I like
Dun,
I like
dun,
the animation
dun,
of
dun.
the Rancor.
Disney budget.
I like the actually like the slave one scene with the Starla.
Sorry, it's the fire spray
Sorry,
gunship.
Hard to
Fire
break old
spray
habit.
gunship.
But really from an
Boba Fett's
FX
start.
perspective, VFX perspective, I think I liked I like what they did here. What did they absolutely got wrong for this series?
I'm just gonna
Okay.
go ahead
Do it.
and say it. Boba Fett. They got Boba
What?
Fett absolutely wrong for this series. For
They did
me,
him wrong. They did him wrong in this.
I don't think they understood a lot of who Boba Fett was. I'm pretty sure they did the research, but I'm pretty sure they were like, nope, we are not gonna use the shit.
The episodes didn't feel like there was a flow to them when you went from one episode to the next. It kind of just felt like, here's a random aspect of Boba Fett's story we could possibly tell in each episode. And then you have the 2 episodes of The Mandalorian essentially just destroying any pace or any flow to the story, which I
Any
think
hope
was
of
just a
character
huge
development.
mistake.
Yeah.
Because you never
Yeah.
got Boba's motivations really. So the last episode just didn't do it for me because of that.
For me, they absolutely got wrong with selecting Robert Rodriguez to direct the core
And
episodes of this series. I think you get him for the action, but if you're not gonna give him leeway to play around with the action aspect of things, then I don't think he's the right director for this show. For me, this show should have been either a mindless action fest, and I'd be perfectly fine with that, or it could be
Mhm.
the opposite of that. You know, like thought provoking. You know, like opens new layers to this character.
Yeah, for me, well, for a series that is titled The Book of Boba Fett, we all expected to get a lot of Boba Fett, and I think the one thing that they got wrong was they took the spotlight away from Boba Fett for too long. Probably for a few seconds it's fine, but for almost 1/3 of the series, they took the focus to Mando instead of Boba Fett, and I think that really ruined any chance of character development for Boba Fett throughout the series. So yeah, I think that's what they got absolutely wrong.
Oh, one added thing. I think Boba should have had his helmet on most of the time.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
there's no more
Thank you.
angas version of him than the one with the helmet.
And they did it perfectly right for Mando. Like he communicates using the helmet and everything, and we got the opposite of that with.
Because you
Boba
can't,
I mean,
you can't do the same
dude-
thing. That's the problem. You can't do another
As-
Mando
yeah,
not
I guess.
removing the helmet
Yeah.
type.
Dude literally wears a helmet the whole time, and he gives out more emotions than Tem as Boba.
No, I think I disagree. I think Tem did well. I think he did really well with what he was given.
Yeah.
Like I do think that when he stabbed, no, I think when he stabbed, Cad.
Oh yeah, except for that part though.
It was just
He
caught it
opened his
when he
mouth in a
stabbed
different way. What expression are you talking about? Like,
No, because if you his facial expression, if you've seen him in other movies where he's doing the haka, it really came out there. And since Mandalorian culture is very much built off Maori
is it?
tradition, to
Is
me
it?
that
Because I'm thinking
yeah,
he's
the
more
Mando
like that taka, yung mga ganong, haka references is really more towards the Tusken versus
That's-
Mando.
Warrior culture.
yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
I
so.
would think so
Right?
too.
Within the new canon.
Yeah.
But I think just remembering that he has some Mando in him, it still fitted for me.
Yeah, I think Legends Mandalorians were more
Legend Mandalorian is basically
We're more close
Maori
to
culture,
the Maori
yeah.
culture.
the language, the dance.
but the canon ones were
They
watered
kind of
down.
portrait to the Tuskens. In the Republic Commando novels of Karen Travis, they talk about the Dawerda Verda dance, which is based off the Haka.
Hmm.
Marcus is trying his best.
He's trying his
Right now.
best to deal with all these nerds.
Wait, okay, so given yung pros and cons that you guys just elaborated on, should there be a season 2 to the book?
Yes.
And why? Or why not?
Miguel.
Yeah, so for me, I think if they're willing to face the whole past of his father and his connection to that, I'd be fine with it. But I do think that the way that the shows are structured now, that we got 2 episodes essentially of The Mandalorian within the Book of Boba Fett, means that the title of the show isn't as restrictive anymore. We will be seeing these characters popping up in different shows. So I don't feel the need for a season 2. I can still get some of Boba's story when we see him in The Mandalorian or season 3, or we
Season
see him
3,
in
yeah.
wherever, because people still know what's happening in his life. And that's why I'm not sure if a second season is necessarily what I feel we need for the character.
I have to agree. I think they're following the same way they've built the other universes. This Mandoverse is basically just going to be trying to develop a like do a Black Panther movie one. Para when you pull him to
Mhm.
join like the big ass Avenger movie, he's got enough gravitas,
You
and
could relate to that, yeah.
most people, fans or new fans, would know what he brings to the table, and I think that's what the purpose of this episode was. This series was. So I think it's enough as far as introducing who he is, and then what his motivations are, kahit mababaw lang, or what he can do and what he cannot do, etc., and who his allies are. I think that achieves that purpose. So you can now pull him in with season 3 of The Mandalorian, even maybe the other series. I think the fans have been burned by this show to the point that
Yeah, I agree.
getting an extension of this with the same storyline, even if it's a different storyline, this just leaves a bad taste in most fans' mouth, because it's not the same character. It's so far off from the character that people were expecting. So the adventures didn't stick. So I think I don't think they're gonna get it right a second time, and even then, I'd probably pay to see other characters get developed more. I mean, it's such a big universe, right? There's so many there's so many characters that they
Yeah.
can develop,
Characters you could
and
explore.
that's why
Mhm.
I'm excited for the next upcoming series, and that's why I think they should spend more. They should
Mhm.
spend the money on other characters instead of spending it on season 2 of Boba Fett.
Yep. Jumping off from what Mark said, yeah, I think it's time for us to move on. They've shot their shot, and there's not really much more to explore. They've met the hell out of Tatooine at this point, and I think there's, like Mark said, this show left a bad taste in people's mouths. So I think it's really just at this point you just really need to move on and go to the next character.
I said yes, so I feel really.
Yeah, you're the
Outnumbered
counterpoint. You need to bring balance.
I think I said yes.
Magbabago ng isip yan.
because
Pero,
of-
magbabago ng isip yan.
No. I said yes
Pressure.
I feel like there's still something that Disney
What?
can pull out of the hat. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like if season two happened, we could probably get some more stuff out of Boba's history. That I just want to see because I don't read the comics. I don't read the book, so I want to see more of Boba on live action rather than
Just
rather
I'd
than
rather
just
read
you
the
know, do the whole
comics.
research.
To be honest.
But yeah, I think a season 2 would be nice. But if not, then it's fine too because whether the Mandalorian, even if you take Din out and you put Boba in it, it would still be the Mandalorian. It would still be the show about the Mandalorian. So yeah. Oh, what if they like pull off a book of
I have a
Boba Fett
question.
and Mando?
How about the Boba Fett video game? Would you buy it? Like if they did 1313. If they
They
did
already
1313.
they already gave us.
Well, I'd buy any Star Wars video game.
Yeah,
Essentially.
same.
So
There's no question
that's
about that.
a very good question.
I mean, I bought Battlefront
No, but
1
I
and
really
2,
think that's
and
a
those games
perfect
suck.
way to deodorize a bad
Boba Fett.
series like the Book of Boba Fett. If you changed format and put him as the central character of a video game, now you can take him to places that this show wasn't able to take. Right? It will probably be cheaper actually to do that type of content versus doing another series, right? Because he's gonna be more badass as a video game for sure, right?
Because you have the power
Mhm.
fantasy of having
Exactly
to murder
that.
every single
Animation, yes, exactly that.
AI.
So the level of debauchery that guy can do on video games, he can't do that on Disney Plus for sure, right? So it's
Yeah.
maybe the medium is the problem here.
Yeah, it might be.
As long as they
Yeah.
don't make it pay to win, I'm on board.
Like they do it like Fallen Order style, like no multiplayer, no anything,
Yeah.
just pure
Maybe
storyline.
change it to
Yeah.
the disc of Boba Fett.
Actually, we were talking about that. Do you think that the title of the Book of means that they could have spin-off series of like the Book of Fennec or the Book of Cobb Vanth, right?
So
Similar to
it's
how the
kinda-
anthology Star Wars movies are a Star Wars story.
I would have gotten it if like the last moments of the show was like Boba closing
No!
a journal or something.
That's so literal.
I'm kidding.
Dude, he became
I'm kidding.
he became the school teacher at Mos Espa, and he's talking about his life. So he's writing his
There and back
diary.
again.
Yeah.
By Boba Fett.
Yeah.
That
the
is
dude-
how I became your teacher.
Time to wrap this up. We've had a very interesting conversation with our friends, Jazz, Migs, and Tris. And we hope you join us again the next time. Any last words from our friends?
Oh, so if you want to get the real Book of Boba Fett, read the Legacy of the Force series. I think
Yes.
they really do Boba Fett well.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
All right. Thanks everyone. We'll see you.
See you next week.
The